Welcome to the If You Ask Betty podcast. This podcast is designed to discuss all kinds of development topics for all kinds of learning professionals. I'm your host, Betty Danowitz, and today we're talking with Erin Thorp about inside-out empathy. Hi, Erin.
Betty.
Thanks for being on the podcast today.
I'm so excited to be here.
Would you help our listeners get to know you a little bit better?
Sure.
Maybe give us a quick intro about you and then even how we met.
Yeah, sure. The quick version of my introduction is that I'm an engineer that talks about empathy. So that can go in a lot of different ways.
For sure.
So I'm from Alberta, Canada, and spent about 20 years in the commercial construction industry as a project leader. And through some of my own experiences, got interested in this conversation around empathy and leadership. And for the last 5 years, that's what I've been solely focusing on. So doing speaking and training and coaching around that topic.
Love that.
Mm-hmm.
And how did we meet?
We met through our connections at Blanchard.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. Brittany Cole. Thanks, Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
Was like, Betty, you got to talk to Erin. Erin, you got to talk to Betty. And
That's
then
right.
we made it happen. And I was like, you should come on the podcast.
And here we are.
And you got to meet my daughter, Lucy,
Yes.
who works at Blanchard.
Yeah.
And I think you did a podcast with her.
I did.
It
Not
runs
too
in the
long
family.
ago.
Yeah.
So it's great.
It
I love
is.
having all these conversations.
We'll have to I'll make a link in the show notes to your podcast with Lucy.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that would be great.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And today we are talking about inside out empathy, which the people listening at home do not get the pleasure that you do to know that I am showing you my Inside Out 2 Legos.
Look at those guys.
Look at there's sadness and here's anxiety. And here's joy, who I think ironically looks sad.
I know. Yeah. We need to work on that Lego.
Not sure what happened.
Yeah. What happened to joy?
I don't know.
I guess sparkle's kind of hard to translate into
I guess so.
Lego.
Into Brickhead anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we're talking about inside out empathy, which is actually the name of your book. So tell us about your book.
So the book was never intended to be a book. It started as a bit of a coaching exercise from a mentor because a while ago I had put it out there into the universe that I wanted to do a lot more speaking around empathy and leadership. And, it was kind of like, everyone I'm seeing speaking has a book. And she's like, well, you don't really need to write a book, but you do need to get your message straight. So we spent a bunch of time kind of putting thoughts down and she asked me some good questions and I did a lot of writing and reflecting and journaling. And as she was reading it, it was her encouragement that basically said, this needs to be a book and you should probably hit publish on this thing. And at that point I was like, look, I barely passed English in high school. I'm an engineer. Like I am not an author. I don't do writing. So I had a little identity crisis there around reconciling those two parts of me. Anyway, hit published the book back in 2017. And that really kind of just launched this trajectory. I spent about 3 more years in my corporate career trying to ignore this calling, I would say, for the safety of a job and, a career and things people understood, because now people are like, what do you do? I don't understand this. And then, 2020, I said, I'm going to go give it a shot.
I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you listened to that voice. Yeah. I made a face. Of course, nobody can see it.
No.
When you said ignoring this calling, because I was like, because I've done that before. I'm still doing it right now. It reminds me of, and I've said this, people who've listened all the time, they're like, Betty, how many times are you going to talk about this guy's book? I don't know. But there was this book by Jeff Goins called The Art of Work.
Oh, yeah.
Have you read this book?
I have read this book.
This is the book that it's still on my shelf, and it has 7,000 tabs because I was so amazed at this book and the biggest, the core message, at least that I got from reading it, and this was a decade ago, was that sometimes your occupation is not the same as your calling.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, and that's the sweet spot.
Yeah.
But you're not guaranteed to stay there.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get this moment where your calling and your occupation are the same. And I would just remember it opened my eyes so much to the idea of it's okay to do one thing by day and something else, in the margin that literally lights your soul on fire.
Exactly.
And eventually maybe you can do that by day.
Yeah.
But it might take some time. So that's kind of what I thought of. And like, that's why I made a weird face, which nobody else saw. But it was because I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. I forgot that I remembered that I forgot that about calling. So that's awesome. I love it. I'm having a moment. Sorry.
No,
I'm down,
it's
Betty.
good.
This isn't
And
about
I think,
you.
well, no, it is. And I think so many times, I mean, I was just having a call with a client earlier today, and that's exactly where she's at, right? Was just like, I tried the thing and it's not the thing. And, you know, and I got to get back to what lights me up and not really, I mean, I think sometimes it's good to listen to those voices because sometimes people can see things in ourselves that we can't see. I don't know that we should rely on them all the time because then it becomes somebody else's version of our life. And I think sometimes in those quiet moments and in those, you know, we get these nudges or these like, ooh, what ifs, you know, those little calls. It's like, we got to pay attention to those too, because sometimes that's more important than what other people can see for us.
100%. Woo! I just had a little tingle. Had a little tingle because that means the rest of this conversation is going to be wicked smart. All right. All right. So tell us how, thank you for telling us about your book, which by the way, I already own. And I don't say that to everybody.
Thank you.
Because I love it. And it's also gorgeous because it's like some of my favorite colors, yellow and teal.
Green. Yeah. Look at that. See?
Just happens to match the If You Ask Betty motif as well. But what got you interested in the topic of sort of empathy in leadership? What sort of brought up that curiosity for you?
So I would say for probably the first 10 years of my career in engineering and project leadership, I heard way too often that I was too emotional, that I needed to get a game face, that I kind of wore my heart on my sleeve, that I wasn't tough enough, basically, to be in construction. But I was wicked good at it. And I loved it. I still love it. I love construction. Being able to drive around and see the things that you had a part in and the buildings that are still standing 25 years later, 30 years later, you know, it literally brings tears to my eyes. I love it so much. And so for those first 10 years, I really tried very hard. And nobody could tell me how to toughen up, how to get a game face, how to do this, like lose the emotional side of myself. I asked a lot and I tried really hard to keep it under wraps, to keep it, you know, to like, if I could kind of cut it out of myself, I would have during those early years because I thought that's what was required of me to succeed in this career that I really loved and desperately wanted. And about that 10-year mark, I kind of threw up my hands and was like, okay, fine, world. Like, if I'm not supposed to be in construction, I'm not supposed to be in construction, right? But this is how I am. And I was like, I've been trying so hard to get rid of this side of me and it's just not working. By then I had 3 little kids. I was, you know, trying to have a career, have a marriage, have kids, do all the things. And I was emotional a lot of the time. And for me, that did look like sometimes crying in my boss's office and sometimes having an emotional outburst on a job site. And what was interesting to me when I kind of sort of said, okay, forget it. Like, I'll stay as long as they let me stay, sort of thing. But this is how I'm going to be. And this is how I'm going to show up. What was interesting to me is then I started to notice other people also had emotions. The very people that were telling me that I was too emotional.
What?
For instance, it's not uncommon in a construction site for somebody to throw a hammer across the room. I have had chairs buried in the wall. I've had people storm out of my office. I've had doors slammed and tools thrown and boots stomped. And it's like, so it was then that I sort of realized, okay, the reason people have a hard time with my emotion is because I express it differently, not because I don't have it. Right. And so the very thing that you think makes you successful, because you're passionate and engaged and all the things, are the same reasons I'm having emotions, because I care about my work, because I want to do a good job, because I'm invested in this project and I'm, you know, deeply care about the people that are here. We just have a very different way of expressing emotions. So I would say that's kind of the entry point and the curiosity. And then what really kind of kicked things up was that was also around the same time I started leading teams. So I was leading a team at home and had these 3 little beings that were requiring my time and attention. I had a team at work that was requiring my time and attention. And very quickly, I had to learn what my emotions were all about so that I could lead all of these people in my life. And In 2016, our oldest, my daughter, was diagnosed with a learning disability, and basically we were told in grade 6 that she couldn't read.
Oh,
so she had gone 6 years in the school system, not basically just kind of floating by and getting through. And that really, like, that was a dark, dark Christmas, let me tell you, when I got that news. And I had a very empathetic boss at the time who could understand what I was going through and the struggles that I had. And I wanted to quit my job. And he led me through a conversation that was basically like, how can we support you for 6 weeks so you can get your bonus? And then how can we support you in a leave of absence so that you have a job to come back to when you're done dealing with this crisis? And I was like, I didn't see it at the time, but it was about 3 months after that whole conversation happened. I was just like, what a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
he didn't have to do that.
He didn't have to do that. I literally gave him my resignation letter, and he said, okay, we can make this happen. Are you open to a different solution? And I'm like, sure, but there is no different solution. Like, I'm a problem solver and I have this thing dialed in. Like, I know exactly what I'm going to do, you know, like,
yeah, I know what to do. Right.
I had spent weeks trying to figure out the solution. And so it wasn't like, I wasn't there for his solution. But the way he handled that conversation and the way he led me through that conversation in one of the darkest times of my life, was absolutely pivotal. And while I was on my leave of absence is when I started to think about speaking and talking about leadership, like I had shared in the opening part of the podcast. And when I looked back at that situation and then some of the other situations that I had faced early on in my career, what I noticed was the ones that went well had the empathy approach and the ones that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where I'm like, holy cow, this is the thing.
This is the
thing, right? When we are leading people through tough times, it's not the technical stuff that we've got to deal with. Like sometimes, sure, there are some complex problems to solve. We all have that muscle, especially if you are in any kind of career where you get paid large amounts of money to solve problems daily. The technical problem solving is not the issue. You have very strong muscles in that area. But what I noticed in my industry of construction and engineering, those muscles were very strong. Everybody's technically sound. You could throw the most complex problem in the room and we would come up with a solution. Mm-hmm. Where people lacked the ability was in the personal human side of leadership, which, you know, everyone refers to it as soft. And it makes me want to, like, to me, that is nails down a chalkboard. This is not soft at all. It is the hardest skill you will ever do. It is the toughest moments of leadership to sit across the table from somebody when they are in their lowest of lows and to hear them and to hold space for them and to lead them through this. And that's really what got me interested in it. And I'm like, this is the thing. Like, this is the thing our industries need. This is what leaders need across any industry. Yep. And the more I look for it, the more I see it, and the more curious I get about it.
So I love that what got you interested was that somebody practiced it on you. Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing. And that kind of leads me to my next thing. Like, so, you know, you went through this situation with your daughter. You know, I'm assuming at some point you came back and then decided to leave and go and do this thing full time, which I love. Again, just sticking at that call like this right there.
There it is.
But how have you used sort of this empathy and leadership, inside out empathy, leadership philosophy in the work that you do every day? Yeah. And I'll ask you for 2 times, like 2 different points. Like, how did you use this sort of when you went back into construction and what you were doing? How did you use it as you moved out on your own? I'm just curious as how that played out.
So the reason the book is called Inside Out Empathy is because to me, empathy really does require 2 different practices. The inside piece is the one with yourself. So how you talk to yourself, the time you take with yourself, the understanding of your own emotional landscape. Mm-hmm. What are you bringing into this situation? Like, we got to have that piece dialed in before we can actually sit with someone else and dial in their own stuff. And what I realized when I went back and as I was putting this together was the bulk of my work was in really getting to know myself, really getting to understand where my own emotions were coming from, and then how to process and work through them so that I wasn't bringing all that stuff into those conversations with my team. How could I tell them I was, in a space, but not making it about me or projecting, my things. And when we're dealing with big things, it makes it extra hard to hold space for other people too. Right. So there was that, that's the inside piece. And the outside piece then is being able to show up and hold space for somebody and understand their perspective and views and opinions, maybe not agree with them, hold space, hear them out, understand, and move to solution, and move to, okay, so we have a difference of opinion. How are we going to get this thing done? How are we going to solve the problem in the project? And I love that you asked this question because I was very intentional on going back and testing it because for me, I just was like, I cannot get on a stage, hit publish on this book, do anything else until I know if this really works and until I can have some lived experience with this. And so those kind of 3-ish years that I was back in my corporate leadership roles, it was like my own little mini research project of really doing the work to understand myself and then to show up and hold that space for my team and to figure out, how do we practice holding the human side of leadership with the technical side of leadership and really putting as much effort into both sides and not downplaying kind of that human side.
Yeah. So there's something you said, I should have wrote it down. Hold on, I got to go back in my head that I want to bring out. So you're talking about the outside, holding space for other people. This is 45. I can't remember.
I know.
It's terrible. It'll come back to me. But so
I use that today, and so the second part of your question was, how does it translate to the work I do now? I mean, I was telling my husband last night, some days entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, let me tell you, because it's an emotional roller coaster on its own. And so I got a lot of work to do with me before I can show up and lead my team, before I can show up and hold space for clients, before I can show up and do, big training days with large, populations of difference of opinions and perspectives. And for anybody who's ever been a trainer or facilitator or, and I know your audience is largely L&D professionals, there's always that one person in the room that just wants to be a little contrary, right?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And so if I've had days where I've shown up and not been dialed in myself and I'm just like, man, that guy just irritates me, and it's like,
don't look at him.
Yeah. Right. It's like, I just want to get you out. And it's not, and when I can show up, when I'm dialed in, when I know I am in a space and I'm not bringing in a whole bunch of other stuff, I have time and patience and ability and capacity to sit and understand where that person's coming from. So it's amazing to me the power of doing this work.
And I love that you start with yourself first, because this is something I mean, part of the work I do at Blanchard is creating custom programs, custom journeys. And 99% of the time, the first session, the first content topic that I bring up in a journey is self-leadership.
Yeah.
Because you got to start with you
100%.
first. You have to get yourself ready, because if you don't deal with your shit, you can't help anybody else with theirs.
Yeah.
You can't lead really well if you're not already leading yourself. And what's interesting is part of that program is, overcoming limiting beliefs. And it's really, a lot of it is about self-awareness, self-regulation, and your ability to ask for what you need. And so, it's kind of very aligned with what you're talking about, is the whole idea of I've got to have to give myself grace is a word that a lot of people use, empathy. But what's interesting is then you turn outside, and here's what happens. I remembered what I was going to say. Sometimes when we are doing the outside part and we are meeting people where they are, we're creating space, we're having empathetic moments. So a moment where I feel for you because I feel as much as I can like you, right? This is empathy. Sometimes that's where it ends, and we get stuck in empathy because we're so busy feeling for them. We don't actually do anything.
Yeah.
And so that's where the empathy plus action is compassion, right? Or action is, maybe you were saying it's the two, you had much better way of saying it. The two parts, it's the what are the things that we have to do, and what are the things go ahead, you say it again.
Oh, the two.
See,
the technical, well, the human part and the technical
human part and the technical part. Yes. I was like, the words wouldn't come.
Yeah.
So it's that same idea, right? Is the technical part is the action. And so that act of empathy then becomes compassion. And I think for a long time, compassion and leadership were not correlated.
No.
At all.
No, there really wasn't. And I think there's many reasons why I get asked often, why the shift. And this is what I see is exactly what you just talked about. We'll have some leaders that overuse the personal side. They get stuck in the feelings and they can't get anything done. And they're constantly letting the team off the hook. And this person didn't show up and that person's got this going on and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And, it's there's just nothing happening because there's all these personal issues. And then we've got leaders that totally put the blinders onto the personal issues and just like, it's about deadlines and metrics and KPIs. And that has just as detrimental of an effect because, while the leader who's paying attention to just the personal side may have no turnover, but there's also no production. This person has no production and a high amount of turnover because you're constantly trying to fill the seats. So it's like, how do we get to the middle? How do we get to do both and?
Yeah, both and. I love that.
Yeah.
So we need this right now. We need this
all the time.
So bad. Right now, 2025, our governing bodies are not leading with empathy. In fact, I'm not sure that I think they cut that word out of the dictionary. I think if you went and you looked it up, it's like literally somebody took scissors and cut it out. It
might be cut out. Yeah.
And the thing is that even though that's what sort of our administration is pushing, I don't think humans feel that way. Most humans still feel like empathy is an important thing. And so we need this. So I'm so happy that this is a topic that you talk about, and I love the way you talk about it. And the other thing I would mention is that empathy, and maybe your book says this, I haven't got through the whole thing yet, but empathy is a skill.
100%.
We are not born empathetic. I'm sorry if I'm totally stealing your thunder, but we are not born empathetic. We're actually born quite selfish and self-serving because as a baby, if anybody's ever had a baby, that baby has no shits to give that you're tired. It is hungry. It needs to be changed. Why aren't you holding me? What, you're burping me wrong? Like that is how that baby feels. And we have to teach our children to be empathetic. Unfortunately, we have to teach adults again how to be empathetic. And if you forget, you have to learn again and practice it. It's a skill. Yeah. So it's something that we have to keep alive between you and me, no matter what our administration has to say. I guess there wasn't really a question. Apparently I had a soapbox that I had to stand on. I'm so sorry.
But no, it's totally true. A lot of times people will ask, is this an innate trait or a skill? It is 100% a skill that we learn. Most of us have the capacity, unless you have some psychological disorders
some that have issues,
that will not have the capacity to have empathy. However, the large majority of the population does have the capacity to be empathetic.
Yes.
And it is a skill that needs to be practiced. So how I talk about it, usually is like, we all have the ability to do push-ups, but I bet some of us can do more push-ups than other people can do push-ups, right?
So, some of us don't have the will.
Right. You have the physiological ability to do a push-up, just like you have the physiological ability to practice empathy. Do you have the will? Do you want to? Is it going to be something that will benefit your life? And here's, what I've been noticing lately. So if you are in sales and marketing, you practice empathy all day long because that is how you relate to your client. Right? That is how you relate to your buyer. You get in your buyer's shoes. What are their points of pain? What are they going through? How do they want to feel? Why are they going to buy your product over the competitor product? So, a lot of the very powerful people, in government and in different things, if they have a business, they may not be themselves, but their business is an expert in practicing empathy because that's how businesses survive.
Yes.
Right? Is because we got to get in the mind of the buyer and we got to become their solution.
Right.
We got to understand what their points of pain are and really meet them where they're at. Yet when it comes to leadership, we go, oh no, that's not important. We don't need to understand our workforce. We don't need to understand our team members. We don't need to know where they're at. We don't need to care about how they feel. We just need to get them to do the thing.
Yeah. It's such an antiquated way of thinking. I mean, it takes me back to pre-industrial revolution when children were working in I'm not even going to say sweatshops, just in the factories. Yeah. Like that was a thing. Like my kids have a hard time wrapping their head around that.
Mine too.
I had a hard time wrapping my head around that, but I remember my grandmother telling me about that.
Yeah.
Like that was a thing.
Exactly.
Like they started working when they were like 8, 9 years old, and even earlier if you worked on a farm. Like that's a thing.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, it's true. And, they didn't have choice. And I think that's the thing employers really need to understand right now is, I mean, my kids can make money doing a YouTube video in their bedroom. They don't have to go anywhere. They don't have to work for anybody. Like, is it going to pay for their lifestyle? I don't know. Probably not. But the point is, there is a lot of choice in the marketplace about how and where and when people work. And it's our ability to solve problems. So here's the thing. We're training these people to solve problems. And that is the thing that can't be replaced, right? That is the AI, like that is our human ability to think critically and solve problems, not build widgets. Like that is not what we are getting highly paid for anymore. It is our ability to think critically, be agile, like
exactly.
That is what we're getting paid for. There are many ways we can use that skill, and you are training your people to do that. And then when you don't take time to care about how they feel, you've just trained someone else's workforce.
Listen to that. Did you guys hear that? We're going to say that again. If you can train that, say it again.
I don't know what I said. No, what I said was, we take all this time to train technically to solve problems, give people all of these complex skill sets. And then we don't care about how they feel. So we've basically just trained someone else's workforce.
Yeah. And
because there's tons of choice.
You've trained that other person's workforce not to care also.
Yeah.
Right. So it's
they're going to go and look for somebody that will care.
Well,
that's what they're looking for.
Yeah.
We don't leave. I mean, this is like a very cliched saying, but we don't leave companies. We leave people. We leave the leader that doesn't care, because at the end of the day, we have, you talk about the baby that just needs to survive. We are wired for survival. We are wired to feel like we belong. We are wired for connection. If we don't have that at work, we spend way too much time there. Yeah. We're going to go find it somewhere else.
We will go find it. We absolutely will.
So we know more about like the human condition than ever before. And what I love is that there's still this I find it fascinating that we're still pushing back on these quote unquote soft skills, which are really just the people skills.
People skills. Yeah. I've heard them called power skills.
Yep. Love that more than soft skills.
It's better than soft skills, but still it's like, there's got to be another way, because this is no doubt the hardest part.
It is the hardest part.
It is harder to be an empathetic leader, leading with empathy, than it is to do any job on the line.
Yep.
To do any job,
give me a spreadsheet
white
all day
collar,
long,
blue collar.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's so much harder. It takes so much more will and self-awareness, self-regulation, all of that.
Well, and that's the piece, is because we also have to lead ourselves through that process, right? So, and we never get a day off because we're human too. So we're always having triggers, responses, good days, bad days, all the things, the feelings, the physical, the mental, all the things. And we gotta make room for that. We gotta manage our own energy in all of those quadrants. And then we gotta go in and set the tone and help everyone else regulate and manage their stuff.
Yep.
Right? So it is hard work. I get why people shy away from it.
It is hard work.
It's not easy.
Yep.
And yet, if you want an engaged, tenured team, this is the piece.
This is the way.
That you got to get dialed in.
Yep. This is the way. So how does your target audience or your clientele, like when you talk to people about this, how do they react to the idea of empathy in leadership?
Well, because it's such a polarizing topic, I get people that are like, I am so not your target audience, because they're just not ready for it. And then I get people that are curious. So it's pretty easy. It's not something everyone's curious about. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had people sign up for workshops before just because they wanted to come and be like, this is nonsense. Like,
really,
you know, which is great. You know, I think it's always good to surround ourselves with some different opinions. Right. And it's been fascinating too, because they'll sit through it and they're like, oh yeah, I get what you mean. So, you know, because at some point, even the biggest skeptic I've come across
mm-hmm.
has had to practice empathy with a family member
Mm-hmm.
or a pet.
Yeah.
Right. Or someone close to them that they love.
Yeah.
And when they can tap into that, it's like, oh yeah, I do have the capacity to do this. I am choosing not to at work because it's messy.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And I think that's the underlying kind of social message that we need to reprogram, is that there isn't a place for emotions at work.
I think work is where I have most of my emotions.
Right?
Like,
we spend the most of our time there.
They're all over the place.
We care about the work we're doing. It's important work. So of course we're going to have emotions for it. So of course it's going to be emotional, right? We're not building widgets on a factory floor anymore. And even then I would have emotions about that because it's how I'm feeding my family.
That's right. That's right.
Right? Yeah. So people are going to be emotional at work. They're going to express it in hundreds of different ways. We have a very diverse workforce, so we're going to have a very diverse expression of emotion. We all got to up our skills to get used to it.
That's right. Yeah, and it's funny because we could watch someone express an emotion at home and we're okay with it. We can deal with it. But the same emotion is expressed even in the same way at work, and it is incredibly uncomfortable and awkward. Why?
Why? Right? Why?
Why?
Yeah. And that's the piece to start to look at, is like, why?
I mean, I've cried at work. I mean, when I used to work in an office, like, I mean, I've obviously cried. I work from home now. So like all the emotions happen here. But like, even when I worked, I mean, I've went and found some place to sit and cry. And usually it doesn't always have anything to do with work. Sometimes you just have emotions and you need to go and have them somewhere. Like I've never thrown a hammer or a chair.
Right.
But I've wanted to.
Right. Never punched a hole through a wall. Maybe wanted to every now and then, but yeah. So it's just a different, you know, and I think we just, what my work center, I was just like, let's not be afraid of the emotion anymore. Like it is telling us something. For me, every time, what I learned was my biggest emotional expressions were always because a boundary was being crossed. So either a personal or professional boundary was being crossed. And so what I had to learn was to notice it early enough to go, hey, I'm starting to feel that way again. What is the thing that's going on here? And how can I get ahead of it so it doesn't blindside me in the meeting next week?
Yep. Smart.
Right?
My friend Cassie says that emotions are like data points.
They are. They're just information.
It's just information.
It's
I mean, I don't think she picked it up. Maybe she did, but it was the first time I'd ever heard it. And she's like, yeah, it's a data point. And I was like, oh, I hate data.
Right? Well, it's like, oh, I feel good today. Okay, great. Pay attention to what you did. Why do you feel good? You want to do that again? You want to feel better tomorrow? Pay attention. Right? Oh, I feel kind of crappy, or that really hurt. Okay, what happened? Like, do you want to feel hurt again? No, then let's learn from that. And
let's learn from it. Yeah.
Right. And it's just like, it's just the same thing. So as soon as you can start to do this with yourself, I think that's where it becomes less scary, at least for me in my own personal experience and the clients that I work with. Once they can understand kind of what's going on for themselves, then it becomes way less scary to sit with someone else, because now it is just data. Hey, I can see that thing that we're talking about really is important to you.
Yeah.
Right. Because I can see that you're having some emotional expression here. So like, talk to me about that. Like, what's going on?
Yeah. That's wonderful. I hope that people listening are like, man, I want a boss like her. I want a best friend like her, because I think this is exactly what we need as a human race, is we need to be more empathetic with each other. And if it starts with our leaders, it starts with our leaders. That's what we have to do. What do you think about people those that don't lead and they don't manage teams? Like, what would be your advice into implementing these type of skills of empathy?
So I think the inside skills are just as important, right? You got to talk to yourself kindly. So I saw I saw a podcast. Actually, it was a reel. Because I don't listen to many podcasts, but I saw a reel the other day, and it was, basically somebody described this as you can put yourself in a room with your high school bully, or you could put yourself in a room with your best friend.
Mm-hmm.
Which would you pick?
I'm going to pick my best friend.
Right? Yet most of us live inside our head with our high school bully.
Get that guy out of here.
Right? We talk to ourselves like the middle school bully instead of our best friend. And so that's like the number one hurdle. Like if you can just tweak and slowly work on how you talk to yourself, you will find your capacity for other people increases dramatically because you're not beating yourself up all day long.
Mm-mm.
Like by the time you get in front of your team, for most leaders, they've already had 3 or 4 hours with themselves and the bully.
Yeah.
About all the things that are bad.
What if you're the bully?
Right?
What if you're the one that's in other people's heads?
Right? I don't know.
Nobody can see our weird faces. Yeah, don't be the bully, I think is the.
So, for those people that don't lead teams, it starts with yourself. So you got to figure out, how do I talk to myself? So one of the interesting things, I think it was in Brene Brown's research when she did Dare to Lead, she wrote about how we judge others harshest where we judge ourselves.
Yeah.
So you got to know that. I know for me, I have a thing around being late.
Yeah.
So
if I'm coming to a meeting with you,
other people to a higher standard around on time. And if I'm not aware of that, like one of the things, so I had to become very aware of it because people would walk in like 30 seconds late and I'm already giving them the side eye. And it's like, whoa, I just had to go to the bathroom before I came to meet,
Bio break. Come on.
Yeah. And so like, that's something that I had to learn about me. It's an area. And I judge myself very harshly around parenting. So that's another topic that I got to be aware of, like when I'm going into conversations. So our list is so personal. Right? You got to know what you judge yourself about. And I will say, as I've been doing this work over the years with myself and when clients and, every time I get a new group or a new client, like it forces me back in to do the work myself. The list of where I judge myself is getting shorter and shorter. And I'm much more quicker to recognize, oh yeah, that's that thing,
that's that thing.
Yep. That's the judgment. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, we're always judging. Judgment isn't necessarily a bad thing. Judgment is what keeps us alive. Judgment is what tells you not to step off the curb right now because 100%. There's a bus coming. Yeah. So we can't hate on judgment completely, but we do have to be aware of it and control how we allow it to control our thinking.
Yeah.
But
I think that's what most people, and I think that's where most people, especially in a work leader situation, if you aren't aware of your type of judgment and how you're doing it, you carry on from like walking down the dark alley into the boardroom and it's the same, you apply the same level of judgment. And it's like no, I need something different here.
Yeah.
Like exactly. I need discernment, but I don't need to like make a quick rash decision about this person and write them off or let them off the hook or, like I need to actually sit here and think about this because I need more information.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the, things that detracts us from this practice is people are moving at such a pace that they think taking time to do this slows them down. And I would argue the exact opposite.
We got to go slow to go fast.
Yeah. You can't afford to not slow down.
No, agreed. What can L&D do to help with this whole empathy in leadership or just empathy in general? What can we do?
I think it always starts with a conversation, like raising awareness. And I love, one of the things I love most to do is, to go in and speak to a group and just plant a seed about this, because a lot of people may not be ready to jump off the deep end and do all the heavy lifting and all the work and go like, oh yes, let me uncover all of my, areas I judge and all the things about myself. But let's get a conversation going, right? Let's start to talk about And it's not either or. We're not saying give up all your KPIs and just care about how people feel. We're saying let's do both. Let's care about how people feel and set some pretty cool targets, you know, and I think we're going to be able to get there.
Yeah.
If we do the both and. So I think it really is around awareness and just like, let's start the conversation. Let's plant some seeds.
I love that. All right. As we're wrapping up, I have two more quick questions. The first one is, what is your hidden talent?
My hidden talent. I saw this question in the prep work and I've still been thinking about it for a week. And I don't know if this is a hidden talent, but I think one of the talents that I have is I've always been pretty good at like just figuring things out. You know, whether it's a people problem or a small machinery problem or any one of those things. Like I do love solving problems. And I think that's probably led me to the work that I've done. And, you know, I feel like there are days where I feel like I've bitten off something that's really too big to chew on, but it keeps me coming back. So
yeah. So your strategic and critical thinking is your hidden talent. So do you like to do puzzles, like jigsaw puzzles?
No.
Why not?
My husband is the puzzler. I don't have enough patience for it.
Thinking is faster than finding that piece.
Word, like brain teaser kind of puzzles, those kind of things. I love to do those.
Just not jigsaw puzzles.
Just not jigsaw puzzles.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Very cool. How can people connect with you if they want to after the show?
Love that. So I also have my own podcast. That's probably a great way to start to check out kind of a little bit more about what I talk about. So that's Tactical Empathy. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts. And my website's a great place to start. So www.erinthorpe.com or .ca. Sorry.
Okay. .ca because Canada.
Because I'm in Canada.
Because Canada.
Yeah. And erinthorpe.com is actually somebody else because we swap email all the time.
It's
interesting.
Well, hopefully she's nice.
She's nice. She's lovely.
There you go. That works out.
Yeah. And then I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram are probably the two social media platforms that I'm most active on right now.
Same.
Yeah.
I do still live in the Facebook a little bit, but really just because
that's where my family hangs out. So that's kind of why I'm there too, but not really for work. So
anyways. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Erin Thorp, for sharing your thoughts today. And thanks so much, listeners. Watch for another episode of the If You Ask Betty podcast soon. Peace out.